Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's ITAM Digital Luncheon. John Bartz here with Network Consulting Services, and today we'll be discussing why IT asset management matters. We've got our ITAM and ITSM experts with us today. Welcome, Todd Hogan from Utah. Hello, Todd. And Lisa Rowe from Virginia. Hello, Lisa. Are we muted? Are we working? Let's check audio here.
We're working now. Welcome,
Awesome.
everyone.
Awesome. Okay, what started out as a roundtable discussion that was supposed to happen at the Capitol Grill in Tyson's Corner has turned into a nationwide digital luncheon due to unforeseen circumstances. But don't despair, food is on the way. We've been working hard at getting all these lunch orders going, and I apologize up front. We had to make some decisions on the fly, so I apologize. I know some people have allergies, etc. So we're going to make good on it, but food will be showing up. Todd, if we've got the presentation there, go ahead and change that to the next slide. We will be sending it out at noon local time. So please email me. My email address is right there. I'd like to hear how this went. This is the new normal here. This is how we're going to be doing luncheons for the unforeseeable future here. So I want to get your input during and afterwards, of course. So my phone's going off the hook here with all of these food delivery companies telling me what's going on. So I'm sure I've made some mistakes somewhere, and I apologize. We'll make good somehow, but this is the new normal here. So we'll be answering your questions throughout today's discussion. So we're going to make it interactive. We'll be giving away an OGO backpack that is at my office, actually. So we'll have to figure out how to get that to you, but we will get that to you. So, okay, we do have a poll. I think we'll pause later in the presentation and do a little poll, but Todd and Lisa, let's go ahead and dive in now and talk about why IT asset management matters.
All right, well, welcome everyone. And we're excited to be here today. My name is Todd Hogan, and I've been doing asset management for a number of years and excited to spend a little time with you. And I'd like Lisa to introduce herself. Lisa is a service management expert, and so we wanted to give you both sides of the house today, IT asset management and service management. Lisa, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, I'm Lisa Rowe. I have been, in the service management industry for more than 20 years now. I guess I'm dating myself. So been around a while, been in the industry for a very long time, worked for a couple of tool vendors, and I don't know, it's interesting. I'm excited to do this because I think that I'm excited to see that ITAM is starting to take off as a practice and in importance to people instead of just getting thrown into CMDB. So.
Great, thanks, Lisa.
Yeah.
Well, Lisa and I are going to be talking today about asset management mostly, but we're also going to talk about how asset management connects to service management a little later on in our discussion. So let's get started.
Hey, Todd, real quick, I just want to make sure that we're presenting right now. Is the presentation live? Is everybody able to see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So there are lots of things that are happening in today's world, demanding more and more asset management capability. And so I'm sure that as you've joined this call today, there's an interest that's piqued your desire to be here. Maybe it was just a free lunch, and that's good too. I hope it all works out, and it's great. So as you think about all of these different things, as Lisa and I travel around the country and talk to executives, we hear 6 consistent things about why executives care about asset management. And so I want to go through those real quickly and talk about what are those 6 things that no matter what industry we speak to, we hear these same 6 things. And so the first thing that we hear of all the things that kind of surprising really, when we talk to executives, we'll say, why are we here? What's this discussion about today? And the first and most simple thing they always say is, we don't know what we have. We're not sure who's using it. We've got multiple systems. We don't really trust the data. We just simply still don't know what we have. Here we are in the year 2020. And interestingly enough, we're not sure what we have. So kind of a surprise. Everybody thinks it's more of a glamorous thing, but the bottom line is most executives will just come out and say, we just don't know what we have. We don't know where it's at. We don't know how who's using it. And then in the very next breath, they'll say, and not only do we not know what we have, but we don't know what it costs. And we're not sure where those costs are allocated. So when my peers, CIOs will always tell this, and the CFOs will say, when we sit down in the boardroom and have a discussion about growing the business, we're not sure when someone asks the question, what's it going to cost from an IT perspective to grow the company by 20%? I'm always a little nervous because I don't know what we have and I don't know what it costs. And I don't have a report today that says, here's all the costs that went to sales. Here's all the costs that went to marketing. And so big concern for people in the management side of IT asset management. The next thing that we'll hear, and sometimes this can be number one or number two, it depends on what has happened in the business, but people are concerned about security, compliance, and risk management. If you've just come out of an audit of some kind, then this is top of mind, and it's driving the decision to get you into asset management. But I'd like to speak a little bit about the first one of those that are listed there, security. We're seeing an exponential raise in the bar of requirements for security. So this is the graphic here from the Center for Internet Security. They have 20 metrics that define what's necessary to keep an environment safe. And interestingly enough, for all of you who are interested in asset management, you should know that the number one and number two things on that list are, you have to know what hardware is in your environment, who's using it, and where it's at. And number two, you have to know what software is in your environment and who's using it and what kind of data is on it. And then there's a couple more, 4 and 6 also play heavily in the world of asset management. So what we're seeing is that security professionals, the CISOs of the world, are almost demanding that organizations get their asset management house in order, because they can't keep the enterprise safe until they know what's in the environment. So whenever you are trying to team up to maybe get some executive support to get your program built, or to be able to get some money or funding for something, your best friend oftentimes is the security professionals who are going to come back and say, that's right. Without this, we simply can't keep the environment safe. So security is becoming such a big part of asset management today. The next thing we'll hear is that executives will say, look, we're very concerned about our end user experience. The challenge we have is that it's taking too long to onboard or to offboard. We've got end users that have got laptops that are 7 years old and have, taking 15 minutes to boot just because it's so old and so many different agents and old software on those devices. So this is an interesting position to be in, because when your end users become unhappy with IT services, what happens is something we call shadow IT. Organizations begin to take it into their own hands out of frustration and start to go do things on their own. And it's a big problem in the industry. In fact, I've been to organizations where senior vice presidents of major divisions have said, look, I don't care what IT says, we've got a business to run. You take your credit card, go buy what you need, and let's move on. And that works a temporary fix, but the long-term impact of that, we all know, turns out to be extremely expensive in terms of cost, licenses, compliance, risk, security. So end user happiness is a very big part of asset management, making sure that we can get the right asset in the right hands of the person at the right time, be able to give them the software they need, the tools they need, refresh that asset, and keep them happy. And that in and of itself can be a challenge, because when end users lose their confidence in the asset management program, another dimension happens we call asset hoarding. And so when end users aren't happy, or their managers aren't happy or confident that you as an asset management team can get them the assets they need, a lot of times they tend to keep those assets when an employee leaves. Instead of returning it back to the pool so that you can use it, they tend to say, wait a sec, we're going to hold on to this in case we need it next time. And so what you'll typically find is, under the desk, in the back room, in the drawer, extra laptops, extra desktops. And this is where costs can really pile up, because organizations now have to fulfill with new assets, because usable and meaningful assets are in the environment, but they're not being returned to the stock management pool. So we'll talk about that in our demonstration today, how important quality stock management is in reducing hoarding and improving end user satisfaction. So these four things here are, a lot of times, Lisa and I will feel a little bit like the family therapist, because as we talk to executives like yourselves, people will talk about some of these frustrations. And then with a sigh, people tend to say, and on top of all that, I only have, 3 or 4 people on my staff. How can I keep up with all of this? How can I scale the business and do more with less? And so we hear executives reaching out saying, how do I remove this complexity? How do I make it so that my team can be successful and we can do more with less? And that's a big part of a quality asset management program, is getting rid of those disparate systems so that we do know what we have. We do know what it costs. We're on top of our security and compliance, and our end users are happy in an environment that I can manage and afford and grow with, without a lot of complexity. And the last thing we'll hear from executives is that they want something called enterprise fiscal accountability. And I think that's a big word, but what it really means is, as an executive, I want to know that the data I'm given is accurate. When I sit down with my peers around the board table, I want to be able to say with exactness, this is what it cost last year to run your division. This is how much software you have. This is where it's at. To the security professionals, to be able to say with confidence, this is exactly where those assets are, so that you can keep the environment safe. So enterprise fiscal accountability is a big part of what every CIO wants and every CFO. So these 6 things, I suspect if we were face to face today, a meeting for lunch, I would see some acknowledgments that many of you are like, yes, those are very common to us. Some of you may have some unique circumstances, but most often these six categories represent why executives care about asset management. So as you're beginning to get interest in this, maybe you already have a program, you're looking to enhance your program, or you're just getting started, there are a lot of metrics that are out there in the industry where we hear that if we do this, we can save 50%. Gartner, for example, very boldly proclaims that if you're not doing software utilization management, as an example, you're overspending in software by 30%. So you can save up to 30% of your software spend by just doing quality software asset management. There are many of these metrics, and it's not my intention or Lisa and I's intention today to go through these, but just to point out that as you're looking for ways to prove to the value of asset management to your teams, there are lots of defined metrics that help you understand where those savings are, how you can save, and then demonstrate that back to your team, which is a really big part of what you're trying to accomplish. But as you think about these executive concerns, you think about this value proposition, then we move into something a little bit called the reality, the real world. So how do I should ask, John and Lisa, are you seeing the videos? Should I move these videos off my screen, or am I just seeing those?
We're seeing the presentation.
We're seeing the presentation, yeah.
Okay, great. I want to make sure, because I'm seeing the videos on the side. I just want to make sure no one else was having to see that.
Oh.
Okay, so with all of that, with all this enthusiasm, you've got all these things you want to solve. The reality of it is that you're in the real world. And as you dive into this, what we find with our customers is that all of a sudden, much like this picture, it becomes a little fuzzy. There are lots of existing cultures and politics and systems, and the data you're looking for is in multiple places, and none of it's right, and you don't know really where to start. So as you jump into this world of trying to get your arms around asset management, it can feel and be a little challenging. You have, on one side, you have this existing enterprise systems, you have culture, you have the way it's been done for years. And then on the other side, you're trying to build an asset management program that requires some additional discipline, maybe some refined data. Data is always the challenge. And so in the middle, you feel a little bit like, where do I start? How can I start this program? I believe that, the executives care. I know there's metrics out there for me to be successful with, but how can I get going? And so that's what we want to talk a little bit about today. So as you think about all these things you want to do, and I'm sure each of you on the call today have a list of things that are on your personal hot list of things you're tired of doing manually. You're tired of having to do a yearly audit that takes, almost a month every year of your life. You're tired of not knowing what software is in your environment. You're frustrated with your upline management asking for things you can't give them. So each of you have some of these lists. Well, there are so many ways you can start this, but what we recommend is that we build this out in a phased approach. We want to be able to take all of those things, and what we've learned here at NCSI and at Avanti is that you have to roll this out in a phased approach, because there's just too much. And if you try to do the whole thing at once, these projects tend to stall, and then you get a level of frustration. And the single most important thing is that you can go and build a really robust, all kinds of bells and whistles system. But when you run your first report, if the data is not accurate, all of that work that you've done will be for naught, because people will say it's a really cool system, but the data is still garbage. So what you'll see as we go through this discussion today, we have got to focus on this fundamental value proposition and on fundamental data. Let me show you how this works. So the first thing you have is think about those 6 executive concerns. Remember back, what was that first thing that the executives told us? I don't know what we have. So don't start out with some fancy API to talk to PeopleSoft. Start with getting data in your repository that's accurate, so that I can answer that question to my executives. Here's what is in our environment. We now know for certainty, these are the assets that we've purchased, and these are the assets that are in the system. And then from there, use those metrics to drive some value back, present back your solutions to the executives so that they can see the value. And another thing that we always see is oftentimes folks like that we're working with, like many of you, you're doers. You want to solve this problem. You're a go-getter. That's what puts you in the position you're in. But oftentimes we tend to go solve this problem, but we don't document where we came from, so that when you go to show your business metric, your executive staff doesn't really appreciate what you've accomplished. So as you're going through this business value metric process, make sure you baseline what the problem is today, so that when you come in and say, hey, 2 months ago, this is how you always want to do it. 2 months ago, this is what our data looked like, and this is what we knew. Today, this is what our data looks like, and here's the value that we can provide. So make sure you're baselining what it looks like before you start, and then sell yourself. Put your sales and marketing hat on, not only as a technical expert, but as a little bit of a salesperson to make sure you're selling to your upline management the accomplishments you've made. Because then what happens is this cycle repeats itself, and it goes around and around and around. And the next thing we focus on is, pulling in some data from our procurement process so that we know what those assets cost. And then we go to our CFO and we say, hey, here's a report that shows all the IT spend for all the assets across all the organizations in the company. I promise you, the day you do that, the CFO will find tremendous value in this. And not only that, but when you take that same information and walk to the security professionals, your CISO, and say, look, this is the data, this is the assets and software that are in our environment, here's who they're allocated to, you will have solidified your position in asset management as a viable part of the enterprise. Years ago, asset management was kind of an afterthought. Not anymore. Today, asset management is front and center, because it's what drives security. It's what drives cost. Look what's happening with this virus situation. And by the way, we hope you're all safe and your families are safe. But think about what's happened in your own companies today. All of these assets that were once in a physical building are now being dispersed out to homes. That has tremendous impact on allocation of equipment, allocation of spend. the ability to keep those devices secure, knowing which asset went to which home, what software is in that environment. This further is going to drive the need for asset management. This whole moving the virus thing has forced us to change the way we do business. And it's also going to drive new importance to asset management. So as you start all this process, the biggest challenge you're going to face is data. And what we see as consultants, as Lisa and I go out into the world, you're going to have an enthusiasm to solve this problem. And when we go into your environment, we're going to start to uncover, take the, peel back the onion and find out that you don't have a good procurement source that's keeping track of make and model and part number and serial number. You've got a little bit of that data in one system, a little bit of that data in another system. You might have multiple discovery tools. So how do we get started by finding that core data that's going to deliver that first set of value? And that's what we'll be talking about through the rest of today, is the importance of this data. So at NCSI, we believe there needs to be a proven approach on how to do this. You start out by understanding your world. You start with something called foundational data. That's what gives you that first value to be able to tell that executive, this is where your assets are, here's who's using them. That has everything to do with ITAM foundational data. And we may even be able to pull out of that the cost of where those costs are allocated. So the first three things that we have there, we had know what assets we have, know what they cost, and be able to help your security team know what's there. All three of those key value propositions can be solved with what we call the ITAM foundation data. And so understanding ITAM best practice and understanding this foundational data is critical for your success. Let's take a look at what I mean here. So foundational data and understanding, this assessment process is understanding ITAM best practice, knowing which data elements we have to be able to answer those first three executive concerns. So let's review for a second some ITAM principles and some best practices. Lisa, I'm doing a lot of talking. Anything you'd like to add up to this point?
Sorry, of course, my long guy shows up now. First my cat, then the long guy. I was like, really? No, and everything that you've touched on is on point. It's really important, to keep it basic, as you've said, and starting at that starting point, being able to show, hey, we haven't been able to show where our assets are, B, when people leave. And this is one of the things I almost interrupted you when you were talking about it, and then I just stopped because I was like, oh, I'll get there at some point. But when people leave the company, it's a really big problem. I've seen just, doing my implementations, it's a huge problem for when people leave the company, not knowing what assets people have. To your point, some people hoard computers, some people hoard cell phones, and we may not know that they have multiple devices. And so when they leave, they may turn in an old device that they have, and they may walk away with some brand spanking new awesome device, and you can't prove it. IT may say, hey, look, I know we just got you this, but how can you prove it if you don't actually, if you aren't actually tracking it? So anyway, I'll carry on.
Great point.
I'll
Great point.
Quiet again because the long guy's about to come back over here. Sorry.
Oh, you're great. Thank you. So let's take a quick look at best practice. Let me check the time here, make sure we're doing okay. So I want to walk you through a couple of basic concepts about ITAM best practice. An asset request, and you're going to see this a little bit later from Lisa. At some point in time, your business needs to request a new asset. We want to be able to integrate that with our service management process. We want to be able to make sure we're tightly coupled with that asset request. But what that asset request needs to do is it needs to be able to go to the ITAM system and say, look, do I have one of those in stock? Kind of go back to that hoarding issue. If we don't have one, then it needs to go to procurement. We need to make sure that procurement knows what we need, and that piece of equipment or multiple pieces of equipment can be ordered in a properly managed fashion. Now you'll notice there's a red box around this purchasing module. And the reason there's a red box is because in the world of asset management, purchasing is the center of the universe. And the reason I say that is oftentimes people will say, look, I've got a discovery tool. I've got Big Fix, I've got EPM, I've got SCCM. I know that I'm managing 50,000 devices. And I'll say, well, that's tremendous. That's really an accomplishment and you should feel good about that. But it also is a little bit alarming because you may be managing 50,000, but what if you purchased 60,000? Where's the other 10? And so what we want to know in asset management best practice is we want to make sure we know what we've purchased so we know what to manage. Back to Lisa's statement about when someone leaves the company, I need to know what was purchased and who it was allocated to so that when that person leaves, I can reclaim it. So purchasing is key. And then, and obviously asset management has to integrate to some point with your purchasing system to get that data. We then need to receive it. And receiving can be a bit of a challenge because some of you that we work with receive in multiple locations. Some of you have centralized receiving, but getting that asset in from the vendor, giving it the proper asset tag, and then beginning its life cycle is critical. So this first phase of green items that you see here represent the information that would happen in this process based on asset request, information that came from the vendor saying we've purchased it, and then a knowledge of who we assigned it to. By itself, this is one leg of asset management, and it's a critical leg. But the next thing that we need is we need a discovery tool or a physical audit or inventory that validates that what we've purchased is really there. And as we go through the demonstration today, this is a really key point. If you just know what you've purchased, that's okay. If you just know what we've discovered, that's good too. But you have to know both in order to do successful asset management. So what you'll see as Lisa and I go through the tool, you'll see how Ivanti Asset Manager leverages this notion of knowing what was procured and knowing what is being discovered so that I can see the difference. This goes back to that foundational data statement. If I know these two pieces of information, what's there, and then where it's being discovered, I can answer those first three executive concerns. What do I have? What does it cost? And can I report back appropriately that it's for security, that it's all there? Once those are in place, then I can begin the overall higher level achievements of asset management. I can work on procurement and vendor management, contract management, compliance management, fiscal management, cost chargeback, budgeting, forecasting, planning. So this represents the entire discipline, but until all those shades of green are in place, there's no way to get there. And a lot of times we'll have customers that'll want to start, they'll want to start on some initiative without getting those foundational pieces in place. And very seldom are they successful. The other part of asset management is process. And Gartner will tell you that without process, it doesn't matter what tool you buy, it's 80% about process, 20% about the tool. What that means is if you have bad procurement policies, bad end user policies, bad disposal policies, bad termination policies, no tool is going to fix your problem. So what you really need is a tool that can help enforce the governance that's necessary to be successful. So as I mentioned, Gartner, yes, please.
We have a question in the chat. Patrick Ferris wants to know what legal process our customers are using to compel existing employees to return hardware.
That's a great question. And it varies very much by organization. Today's overall culture is pretty sensitive about any kind of HR enforcement. There are some companies that will hold that out against the last payment of your last paycheck. To be pretty stern financially. Other organizations are a little more timid that way. So HR policy has a lot to do with it. But primarily what most customers are finding value in is if they can let the upline manager know these are the assets that have been allocated to your team, then there's a level of accountability that comes through the management channel because the management can be held accountable for what that individual has. So there's two ways we see it at the HR level, and we also see it by informing your upline management of where those assets are allocated. It's a great question. Okay. I don't know.
Todd, sorry
Yeah.
about that. Real quickly, don't forget we do have that poll that we wanted to share at some point throughout today's presentation as well too. So whenever you think it's a good time to stop, take a break, and get a little feedback from everybody.
Let's
let
get
me know.
through this next slide and then let's do it.
Sounds good.
So with Avanti Asset Manager, which Lisa and I are going to be showing here in a second, there was a discipline. There's obviously some 30 plus years of experience between Avanti, Heat, Landesk, all of those companies that have the history. But in addition to the creation of the Avanti Asset Management tool, Avanti spent a lot of time with the International Association of IT Asset Managers. They're kind of like the ITIL of the service management world. And they have 12 key discipline areas that the Avanti tool has incorporated. If you're not familiar with this organization, you should be. They're an outstanding organization that help you understand how best practice for asset management works. If you go out to iaitam.org, they have some excellent resource material there. You can get your people certified and trained as a hardware asset manager, software asset manager, certified asset manager programs. Excellent resource if you're trying to get your arms around how do we solve some of these problems? How do we know what data we're looking for? How do we make this work? So we highly recommend them as part of this best practice discussion. All right, before we jump into the demo and show you how Avanti has solved these asset management dilemmas that we've been talking about, John, let's take the poll.
Okay, let's see. I'm showing the poll now. I'm not sure if you're seeing it up there. I'll go ahead and end the poll. So if everybody else, we do have quite a few people that have submitted their answers. So I'm going to end the poll. I'll give it 5 more seconds here. Everybody should be seeing it. Then I'm going to end the poll.
We don't see it.
And I don't think we see it yet, but I'm ending the poll here, and then we will share the results here. So hopefully everybody can see the sharing. Todd and Lisa, do you see it?
Yes, we do.
Attendees are now
Yeah,
viewing
we
the
do.
poll results. So here's our very first poll on Zoom.
Okay.
So about 86%, they actually report up to the same organizational leader.
Excellent. Excellent information. I'm
That's
a
good.
bit surprised by that, actually. I
Yeah,
thought it would be a little bit lower than that.
I did too. It's actually good.
Yeah, great information.
We'll go ahead and stop sharing. We can continue on there. And don't forget, there is a Q&A section as well, and there is the chat. So if you feel comfortable just putting it in the chat section, Lisa's watching that, and we're also watching the Q&A as well. Just a quick update, my mobile device is going off, so I know lots of things are being delivered. I do see some challenges and issues, one cancellation, so please understand, we will make good. If it's tomorrow, it's tomorrow, but we're getting lunch to you one way or the other. Okay?
Hopefully, if it's tomorrow, it will
Please
still
email me. We'll put my email back up there as well. So please email me directly. So continue on. Thank you.
All right. Well, I hope you're all enjoying the lunch. So far, we've kind of talked about why executives care. We've talked about foundation, getting started. How do we do this in a phased approach? Let's take a look now for a little bit about how Avanti has solved this problem with Avanti Asset Manager. So I'm going to jump out here and go to demonstration. And hopefully you can see my screen. All right, I'll move this down so I can see around it. So Avanti Asset Manager, Lisa focuses on the service management world in our company, and I focus on the asset management world. But the good thing about Avanti Asset Manager is that it is the same platform. So what we'll be seeing a little later is Lisa talks about how this fits in with the service world, is that Asset Manager and Avanti Service Manager are the same platform, sharing the same CI, in fact. So we'll leave that to Lisa to kind of discuss how those two worlds come together. But when you first come into the tool, when you first come into the tool, there's a variety of dashboards. These dashboards are customizable. They're unique to the role you're in. So if I'm coming in as a contract manager, maybe I want to see just the contracts dashboard. So I would see this dashboard. If I'm coming in as a purchasing person, I might see purchasing dashboards. So the tool is role-based in its capability. You'll see up here, one of the neat things about this tool is that you can switch roles. If you have rights to multiple roles, you can immediately jump between them, but it's role-based and very granular capability in being able to lock down data elements or processes or workflows or automations, all based on the user's role and permissions. So let's take a look at some hardware assets to start with, so we can see what kind of information comes into the system. So in the tool, I can support 5 major classes of hardware: computers, general assets, infrastructure, mobile device, and peripherals. I can have as many subtypes as I want there. So if you'll notice here, under computer, I've broken it down by desktop, laptop, Mac, server, virtual client, virtual server. If I was the infrastructure, I could have router, switches, hubs. We have a lot of hospitals that have used the general asset category to put in some clinical assets. We have people that are tracking chairs and tables and forklifts. Obviously, the tool's designed around IT assets, but you can track whatever you want in the tool so long as it has a serial number. Let's go look at a given asset so we can kind of see what's available with respect to a given asset. So here I'm looking at a server. Somebody pointed out the other day that this is not a desktop. So I've got the wrong picture in here if you're familiar with the Dell PowerEdge R430. But one of the things that is neat about this tool is that I can have information in here that tells me about the make, the model, the part number, and information that I want to have. So for example, here you can see it's a Dell R430, the part number, a nice description, the color, weight, dimensions, all of that information is there. In the center column, I can see who is this assigned to. This is assigned to Andrew Smith, and it was assigned to the London office. So going back to our PowerPoint, remember we received the asset, we then assign it out to an individual, and it begins its life cycle. Down here in this section, the security team loves this because they can get some context about what's on this device. Is it sensitive? Has it got sensitive data? Has it got a security risk? Has it got some regulatory PCI or HIPAA or SOX data on it? What's the use policy? Should this thing be allowed outside of the office? Is it okay to be at home and office? What are the guidelines that govern this asset? In the right-hand column over here, I have the purchase date. And so I can see from the purchase how old this asset is. You'll notice here that the asset age is automatically calculated. And in this case, it's 38 months old. So it's now 2 months older than when we had hoped to refresh it or return it. We were planning on rolling these over every 3 years at 36 months. Well, I'm now a couple of months over that. I've also got all my warranty information and details here. So all of this information is we knew about this information because it came through the acquisition. And then remember in our PowerPoint slide, we had the discovery section where we wanted to have the second element of data to compare against that information. Well, that happens to be this discovery tab right here. So if I click on the discovery tab, I see a little different information. I see the assigned values that said, hey, we assigned this to Andrew. We assigned it to the London office, and it's assigned to the operations organization. Well, when the discovery tool ran, when Endpoint Manager ran in this case, it came back and said, wait a minute, hold the farm. This thing's not being used by Andrew Smith. It's being used by Bill Barker. And according to the subnet gateway that it registered the agent on, which is mapped to a friendly location, this thing's in Salt Lake City as of just a couple of days ago. So somehow, I don't know how this thing got across the ocean, but the point is, according to the discovery tool, we now know where this asset really is. These are those 2 data elements that we talked about in the PowerPoint slide from a best practice perspective. I know the information over here that came from the acquisition and who I assigned it to as an asset management team, but I also know what discovery said happened to it as of 2 days ago. This is how I like to say, herd the cats, if you will. If I don't know where it should be, which is over here on the assigned value, and I don't know where it is today, it really becomes impossible to do good asset management. So with both these dimensions of information, I can run exception reports to say, hey, show me all the assets that are somewhere where they're not supposed to be, or being used by someone that's not supposed to be using them, so that I know what's going on. So down below this information, I have all of the other information that comes from the discovery tool. IP address, subnet, MAC address, CPU information, operating system information, memory, physical storage, and this reports as often as I want my discovery tool to tell me. So I have ongoing feeds about this asset record, which includes software installed. So here's a list of all the software that was installed on this device. I can see everything there is to know about the software that's on that device. I can look at how often it's used, the duration of time, when it was last used, so I can see what's going on with software. I can also see the network interface card that was speaking the last time this discovery tool ran. So these three tabs here, discovery, installed software, and network, are dynamic feeds that come in from my discovery tool whenever I run that tool. And that could be SCCM or Endpoint Manager from Avanti, or there are other discovery tools out there that are being used in maybe your environments that could also be used with the system. Another thing that is important is that we remember over here, we had the user was assigned to Andrew. Well, we thought it might be nice to just say, well, what other assets are being used by Andrew? And so you can see here, here's all the other assets that are being used by Andrew. The tool supports relationship mapping. So I can go and create relationships about how this asset interacts with other assets. And I can actually go over and see a visual map of what that looks like. Pretty cool when I'm doing data center mapping to be able to see how this server maps to virtual servers or to SANs or to infrastructure components. Contracts. Every contract you put in the system is tied directly to the asset it impacts. Big issue because a lot of times contracts are managed by the contract team and they really don't have any information about what devices are being associated with that contract. They simply know the start dates, the end dates, and the renewals. And so this way, as an asset management team, we can help our contract management team out by being able to say, these are the assets that are specifically associated with that contract. That way, when I get ready for a renewal, I know exactly which assets are going to be impacted. Vendor information will tell you who the vendor is. We support something called vendor scorecarding. The ability to put in an entry out in the field when you guys are out working so that you can give some basic scores on how well this asset's performing and the vendor that's supporting it. So you can get feedback when we talk to the, later on when we're doing vendor management, we're thinking about renegotiating, all of this feedback can come back in from the field. Finance tab, probably one of the more important fields. Remember that second executive concern? I want to know how much this thing costs. So we want to be able to pull this in directly from your vendor or from your accounting system. So for example, maybe I'm buying from Insight, SHI, CDWs, direct from Dell, HP, Lenovo. I can pull this finance data directly into the tool so I know exactly how much each asset costs and where those costs are allocated right here, this financial owner field. This is where I assign the organization or business unit that's consuming this asset. So I can run a nice report, give it to the CFO and say, look, this is where the spend is going in the company. You'll notice here the salvage value is 1,000. There is no depreciated value because I'm past useful life. If I were to go back and change my purchase date back to where I was underneath that 36 months, you would see that I have a depreciated value, but in this particular example, the value is already fully depreciated. Another piece of information about financial tracking is knowing the ongoing costs of the asset. So here's the purchase cost. I've got contracts that renew every year for $200. And what I can do then is give you the total cost of ownership as that asset moves through its life cycle over a 3, 4, 5, 6 year period. This number is probably going to continue to grow. And that's the true cost of ownership. That's what we need to be able to help budget and plan with. Sometimes all we have is the purchasing price, but we all know that's just a small part of asset ownership cost. For every asset that you can have an unlimited number of notes and fields. Here's an example where I stuffed in the configuration that came from the manufacturer when we first bought it. I can have attachments. Maybe I want to put a policy or an end user manual or some files to support it. Another important feature is inventory tracking. every time that asset moves from one location or one user to another, the system logs it. So in one place, your auditors and your security team where that asset has gone over its life cycle. Couple more here. ScanLog. Avanti provides an Android barcode scanner that allows to go out and scan in real time. I don't have any entries here, but you can go out into the field, scan an asset tag, make a direct call to the system, bring back exactly where that asset is supposed to be, make the changes in the field, and keep your assets up to date, as simple with just an Android-based device. And by the way, Avanti is telling us that iOS will be available later this year. Audit history. Audit history is the ability to see every change made by anybody that administers the system. So here's the date and time when that change was made. Here's the administrator that made the change, and here's the value before and after. Everything in this system is tracked on the front end and the back end to know exactly how it was changed. So this is all the information that's available for any given asset. And oftentimes we get asked the question, well, is there any way to tie this to the service management system? You'll notice here that I have a tab for incidents. And I think, Lisa, you have got another system where you've tied this together. Do you want to take a minute and talk about how all of this information can be consumed with service management?
Sure. Let me, so I can actually, if you want, let me, thank you, Todd.
You're welcome.
Let me put this over here. So I will share. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so you see, we're looking at the same server that we were just looking at with Todd, although with a proper picture.
Sorry.
So Service Manager and IT and Asset Manager on the same platform. I think we mentioned that, and this is there's many good reasons for that. And it's integrated seamlessly. So as Todd was saying, we have all of the IT asset management functions available, right? But you can also, you see I'm logged in as an asset administrator now, just to show you that, so you can give visibility to your asset administrators. So you can say, hey, you know what, maybe I want to see how many incidents are logged against this device. So you can see if you might have a problematic device. You can also give them visibility to changes and things like that. But I think that would end up being more on the service management side. You do have the ability to do that. You also have the ability, if you want to give, it's a role-based system, right? So if you want to give asset managers the ability to create incidents against assets, you can just click the new incident button right here, and they could quickly log a record, fill in the necessary information with the little asterisks, and quickly log a record against that device, and be able to control it. Excuse me. So you could get a good, quick idea of what's going on. Or if you wanted to look at one of these old incidents, you could go ahead and just click the go-to button, and then you would look at it, or you could just double click on it and have a quick view of it, which is the same view we just saw, right? But let me show you, if we change the roles, you see I have a million roles here because I demo. Let me change to the regular administrator. And I was in here already earlier, but we have the CI save searches. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up this same device here on the service management side of the house. So we're in the service manager side of the house. You see up here, all of the workspaces have changed now. So we have incident, service request, problem, change, same device, right? Same information. But now on the service management side of the house, we've got incident, problem, change. So we can see all of the items that we have, all of the service management items tied to this. You know, with service management, you know, the interaction between IT asset management and service management, they're so intermarried at this point. If you look at ITIL v4, the service, ITAM touches all of the service and technical management practices. So it touches at least 11 of the 14 general management practices, and it touches all of the rest of the practices, right? So the value of running these two together, you know, it improves your efficiency in your services. You know, we can much better deliver our services to our customers. We can go in to log a request. You can reference the request to log the request. We can send the request out to purchasing. You can then that purchase data can then be tracked into ITAM. The receiving data can happen. All of this is tracked in ITAM. The assets are shared. So the assets in ITAM become CIs and Service Manager, which is our CMDB. Your end users feel more confident. Not only do the end users feel confident because we know when an end user calls in, hey, these are the devices that this end user has. You know, we know specifically, hey, these devices are tied to this user. But management, finally, we can say, you know, definitively, this user has these devices or this department owns these devices. When this person leaves, we need to reclaim these devices. We have a much better grasp on the infrastructure. If the teams are together, I was really happy to see the poll saying that a lot of the ITAM and ITSM teams report up to the same people, because this allows us to share the data, not only the data, but it allows us to share the responsibilities, and it allows a lot of overlap because there's so much overlap between the two practices. I really think sharing the workload and the responsibility is a big, yeah, it's just a big benefit. Anyway, you can better mitigate your change risks. There's just so many reasons that having this in an integrated platform is just, I'm so happy that this is in an integrated platform now. So I'll be quiet or I'll gush on forever.
Thank you, Lisa. That's excellent, because this is what our customers want. They want that integration. They want it to be seamless. And as you can see from when Lisa changed roles, it just immediately allows you to see another dimension of the same information based on, you know, your role and responsibility. So Lisa, if you'll give me back control, I will.
Oh, absolutely.
A couple more things to show, and then we're going to go into question and answer time. So in addition to all this information about hardware information, this would be true whether this was a router, a switch, a hub, a phone, all of this detail is the same. But the system also includes a very robust catalog management tool. So I can see all the standard catalog items that I want in my environment. So for example, here's a Dell Inspiron 17500. This is the catalog where I can put in the make, the model, the part number, a description that can be used by the service asset request. So when Lisa on her team goes out and a customer wants to put in a ticket, they can see this catalog and say, oh yeah, that's what I want. I want to buy one of those. But more importantly, we can go and tell the system automatically knows how many of those are already in my environment, 44 of them to be exact. And more importantly to that asset request is how many of them are available and where are they available? So you can see that I have 11 of those in the Salt Lake office and I have 3 of them in the London office. So the integration between the service catalog, the asset request process, and stock management is seamless. I know exactly what I have, where it's available. Remember that discussion, the fourth question, or the fourth thing that executives struggle with, that end user management and their happiness? Well, stock management is a big part of that. Maybe you've got some organizations where they just can't get over the fact that they want to know that that asset is in their control. Well, great. Go to their location, offer them a little corner of the building or the corner of their room, call it a stock location, but at least allow them to just put that back into stock, even though the stock is in their room. You now have visibility into that data. So knowing what assets are in your environment, you can have as many stock locations as you want. And for any one of those stock locations, it will tell you every asset by type and subtype that's available for consumption. And I
To
can
go
go into
even
those.
farther from there, to go even farther from there, we can configure business rules on our side of the house that says if it gets down to a certain level of stock, you might want a notification saying, hey, you have this level of stock and perhaps we want to look at ordering new stock. We can do that. Or we could even trigger an automatic order if you already have pre-approved orders. We can do that too.
Absolutely spot on.
Saves a ton of time. It saves a ton of hassles, a ton of headaches. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's a great point, Lisa. Excellent. With each location, just as Lisa was describing, there are stock re-enter points, but there's something else that we have inside of a stock location. It's called a consumable. There are things we want to track in asset management that we don't track individually. I'm certainly not going to track a mouse or a keyboard, or some companies nowadays are not even tracking monitors or displays, but we call them consumables. But I do want to know how many of those are available in a given warehouse location. So that's part of the tool as well, being able to know what's in that environment. We talked about purchase orders and the integration with those, so I'm going to skip over that, but let's go talk quickly about contracts. Contracts are important because this is where we get regulatory and compliance support. So for any contract, you can have as many different types of contracts as you want. So for example, I can have an entitlement, an extended warranty, a lease, maintenance agreement, NDA, purchase agreement, service level agreement, support agreements, etc. So down here, let's talk about the one that almost everyone's concerned about, and that's the entitlement. I want to be able to know if I bought a piece of software, how many of those pieces of software do I own? So you'll see here that I've got, this is an entitlement, so it's kind of a sample entitlement here, but this could be Adobe Illustrator, it could be Microsoft SQL Server, it could be whatever. And it can see that I've purchased 10 of them, but down here, this is where I would fill in all of the information, the license keys, the metric it is this thing a core-based license? Is it a CAL-based license? Is it an Oracle license? There's all kinds of licenses and you can add to that. And then I can over here on the right-hand side, if I want to put in information about upgrade rights, downgrade rights, multiple use rights, all of this information then can be managed because I know the renewal dates. I know the renewal terms. Do I want to let the vendor know 30 days in advance? And you know what? I want my team to know, oh, better yet, I want my team to know 90 days in advance. So you can fill out these compliance records, and they're then linked directly to the software assets, which is what we'll jump into now. So if I go over here to my software asset records and open up Microsoft SQL Server, here's the version 2008 R64 Enterprise. You can see that I've got an entitlement record, which is the legal document that tells me how many of these I own, which is what we were just looking at. So right here, I've got SQL Server. I've got 20 of those. If I go to that record, you can see all the details. Once again, how many I own, the start date, effective date, end date. Is it a core license? If I had a key or anything, this would be all that information that we want to track about that license. So over here, I can see that if I want to assign some of those assets from that entitlement, or I should, let me say that better. If I have an entitlement that I want to say, of those 20 that I own, I want to make a specific allocation to the following 4 devices so that I know that those 4 licenses are assigned to those devices. Or if it were a named license, I could do the same thing with employees. And I could say, I'm allocating one of these licenses to AJ, Alex, and Eileen. So there is the ability to control these licenses and say who has them, how many there are, and what's available. So in the tool, you have great control over the contractual side of what entitlements you own and where they're allocated. Let's take a look at vendors real quick. So we talked about vendors. It's nice to know that I have some insights on my vendors. So for example, here I have a little contact list that shows me the different contacts at the company. How many catalog items are being serviced by this vendor? I better know that if I'm thinking about changing vendors. Here's all the assets in my environment from that vendor in one click. Purchase orders. Here's all the purchase orders that I currently have active with that vendor. And here are all the contracts that are in place with that vendor. Here's that overall performance scorecard. And here's all the entries that show me everything, all the good, the bad comments that have been made. So when they get ready to renegotiate, vendors are notorious. They want to show up, take you to lunch, take you golfing, and then they're going to ask for your business. Well, wouldn't it be nice if you had a history over the last year of the good and the bad problems that you've had so that you could better negotiate with those vendors? So that's a really quick overview of the Ivanti Asset Manager product. On the back end, one of the things that differentiates this tool from other products is the tremendous capability you have to make modifications to the tool. You can add new fields and forms in seconds. You can go in and create robust workflows so that you can see, Lisa talked about being able to write business rules that govern how activity should happen. Here's an example of a contract approval. So it's kind of like a Visio diagram. As when this populates, you just simply drag the desired state out into the grid, and then you'll be able to just connect the dots. And then you can create workflows that govern. Remember that Gartner said asset management is 80% process, 20% tool. Well, this is where we use the tool to enforce how we want our end user policies to behave. Tremendous capability on the back end to create business rules and workflows and automations that help guide and discipline the product the way it goes. So we've gone a little long. We wanted to keep this under an hour. Hopefully you've had a great lunch. Let's throw it open for a couple of questions. John, back to you.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. Jessica, I see your hand is up. I didn't know if you wanted us to unmute you if you had a question for that, or you can put it in the text chat as well. I'm not sure if we got, Patrick had a couple of other questions. I wanted to make sure that we got to all three of those questions. Lisa, did you see those in there as well? Patrick had a few more.
I did. I didn't want to interrupt again.
Okay. So that was, we talked about the legal process. He says we've been using a tactic of bricking devices with encryption control. If the ex-employee wants data from the device, they have to send it back to us, and we will send them a thumb drive and their personal data. I guess that's more of a statement there.
Yeah.
That's in the chat there.
Then he wants to know, does Ivanti Endpoint Management have a native component that could be used for encryption management and remote wipe? I don't know about encryption management, but I do believe that you can do remote wipe with EPM. I believe so. I know we can with one of the products. I think it's EPM. I'm not an EPM engineer, but we can take that and get back with you. Do you know that answer, Todd?
I don't. I think I'm right with you. I know there is a product in the portfolio that does that, but I'm not sure if it's part of EPM or not.
Where is Brian Hodzik when we need him? Huh?
I know. Sorry. I will, Mr. Perez, I will find out for sure that answer and get back with you. And then he also asked if Asset Manager, can it share or get information with ServiceNow? I'm assuming.
Yes, the answer is yes. This platform supports two different types of integration. Flat file connection through CSV connectors that can be scheduled, or we also support REST and SOAP APIs. So those APIs can be used to talk to almost all or any of the enterprise applications that we see in today's world, because almost everyone supports those APIs.
Okay, great. If there's no more questions, we can go ahead and wrap it up there. We do have one final slide there. Let's go ahead and put your email addresses up there, Todd, if you don't mind. And if you could add mine as well. I just want to make sure. This is our first time that we're actually doing food across the country here today, and my mobile phone has been going off the hook here with all the different food delivery services. So I did get a couple of emails. Thank you for that. Jessica, got your email there. Thank you for that. But feel free to, if you're not seeing it, and I know West Coast, you're not going to see it for another hour or so, It's jbarts@ncsi.us. I want to hear one way or the other. We're going to continue to do this. We will get this right. And we will continue to do these digital lunch and learns because we can't do them in person anymore. And if we were at the Capitol Grill in Tyson's Corner today, I'd be walking around the table and making sure your food is okay. Today, it's a little bit more challenging. So please feel free, email me. We're going to make this happen. We're going to do this again next month as well, too. So backpack, someday I will be able to get back to my office and get that backpack. So I think the questions we got were from Patrick. Is that right? So
Yeah.
Okay.
Good job,
So-
Patrick.
So
Patrick,
Patrick, you weren't too engaged.
we'll get that OGO backpack out to you. Thanks for doing that.
It's a great backpack. I don't know if you've ever seen one.
Yeah, they are awesome.
I love those backpacks.
And we'll have more events coming quickly, or coming soon. Make sure that you check out our website for future events. We're going to do like this. We're going to send out food, or we're going to send you something and keep it interactive as well, too. So Todd and Lisa, thanks for joining, and thanks for turning on the video cameras. I know this is a first. Another first we did today was we went live on YouTube. So not quite 1 million people watching, but we did actually.
How many people got to see my cats? Awesome.
YouTube Live. So a lot of firsts, right, in this new world. So
Well, thanks to everyone. Thank you, Lisa, for
Thanks, guys.
it was awesome. And
Oh, Todd, you're awesome. Thanks.
we do a lot of these. We do a lot of ITAM consulting, and I know that whether you choose Avanti, an NCSI, whatever you do, I think the things you've learned today will help you if you just focus on the basics and make sure that you deliver back to your stakeholders value. Solve that that number one executive concern. Help people understand, what do you have, where's it at, who's using it. And if you'll just do that one, and you do that one well, it will lay the foundation for your programs to grow, and then you can move into all the advanced things that you want. So best luck to all of you. Keep safe with this crazy virus thing, and thanks for joining us today.
okay, thanks everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.